Hello and welcome to this episode of Energy Connection. This is Bruce Stimson, Vice President, and I'm here today with Anno Scholten, President of Connexx Energy, Inc.
Hey, Bruce.
Anno, a lot of people are talking about load response, DR, ADR, price response, energy efficiency programs. Can you help me understand what all this is about?
Yes. If you think about it, if you think about the grid structure, it's a very simple model, right? There's a supply side and there's a demand side. Somebody consumes it, somebody makes it.
Right.
What's become clear here in the US over the last several years now, our investment in that grid infrastructure has dropped off significantly.
Right.
Demand is starting to outstrip supply, and especially in peak periods. For those of you who lived through some of those peak periods just last year, for example, you would experience some brownouts in Texas and the East Coast and those sort of areas. One way to deal with those issues and problems of grid outages and grid demand is, rather than create more supply, which is an expensive proposition long-term,
build more power plants,
coal plants and lines and transmission lines, which is a long-term expensive proposition. Another way to deal with that situation is to better manage the actual demand.
Right.
How can we take the peaks off it, and instead of having very peaky loads, everybody at 2 o'clock in the afternoon's got all the air conditioning running through the time that they get home, and how can we better level that load out, and how do we do that through either shifting the load or leveling the load or minimizing or not using some of the load more effectively. So a lot of these terms that you talked about, demand response, load management, is a direct action at managing the demand side, making that more flat, and so reducing our need to create more supply.
All right. And this is not new. Obviously, some companies are already taking advantage of these technologies. What percentage of companies are actually taking full advantage?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what you should probably look at is, what's the breakdown here in the US, and you could break it down to the industrial, commercial, and the residential marketplaces. The industrial consumption of energy in the US, I think, is of the order of 30 to 35%. Residential is probably the same, about 30%, and commercial buildings about 40% energy consumption. Demand management in the industrial side has actually been quite high. A lot of the industrial companies have been doing a lot of demand management because it has a direct impact on their business. They use significant amount of energy, per unit manufactured.
And they're actually getting paid to do this.
They're getting paid to manage their loads. I'll give you an example, a rock crushing company, one of our customers, they crush rocks for a living, make cement. They have 20 megawatt loads. Taking one rock crusher off takes 20 megawatts off the grid at a peak time. You don't need to be crushing rocks at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the peak summer. So we could move that and shift that around.
Right.
So that most of the industrial sector has been doing some form of demand or load management for quite some time. The interesting sector right now is the commercial buildings. What was happening, of course, is we've tapped out a lot of our industrial sites as far as what we can do with those sites. There's only so much you can do. And now we're looking at, the industry is looking closer at the other 40% of the electrical load, which is commercial buildings. How can we better manage the load and demand in commercial buildings? I think what's significantly changed over the last few years, like last 4 or 5 years, is that commercial buildings have been doing some form of load management or capacity management for quite some time using the existing building systems. What's now become very interesting is tying that actual load management that they were doing as good citizens, as good corporate citizens, to actual financial rewards that utilities and ISOs can offer these customers, and actually pay them to do this just like they are paying the industrial company. Come back to your question though about what's that percentage right now in the commercial space? Very low. If it's 1%, that would be very high.
So there's a lot of opportunity out there.
A significant amount of
right sector. So if a commercial building or if there are some industrials out there that aren't taking advantage of this right now, decides to get involved, they're going to get paid for their stake in it. What about your Connexx Energy partners? They're the ones who are going to actually help these customers do it. What's in it for them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? I mean, there's the actual amount of money that gets paid to the end customer. There is a component that's required to actually install some technology and some connectivity and some software.
Somebody's got to do that installation.
Someone has to do that installation. And there's some training involved as well. You have to train the customer on how to use this new technology that they've just been installed. So there are some components there for the energy partners to pick up some dollars on the installation, the training and support and maintenance of that.
Right.
But what is actually more interesting to these guys is that they're really actually offering their customers now new services and new solutions And what is more important is that monies that are going to the end customer for their involvement in the program now becomes available to both the energy partner and the supply chain to provide additional energy efficiency products and services and solutions.
So they got this big check that they just got from their electric bill, and they can actually turn that into building upgrades. And
exactly, and variable speed drives, or efficient lighting systems, or other programs or initiatives they've always been looking to try and do, but never really had the funding.
Right,
yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, I don't know if anybody then listening to this broadcast is interested in talking to you about this industry or what Connexx can do for them. How do they get in touch with you?
The easiest way is our website. It's connexxenergy.com, which is CONNEXX energy.com.
All right.
That's the most efficient and quickest way to. My contact details are there. You can have a quick read of what we do and how we do it. There's some forms that you can fill in. There are some conferences coming up in the next couple of weeks. The AHR show in Chicago. We'll be there. We'll have a booth and a presence. I also have 2 talking opportunities.
So they can come and meet you.
They can actually come and meet me, and they can listen to some of this stuff in a lot more detail.
There you go.
And a lot of the technologies being involved. And that's the quickest and the easiest.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Anno. And if anybody listening has any interest in getting in touch with us, please go to the CONNEXX energy.com website. Well, thank you, Anno, for joining me today, and thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Connection.